Hello there. I present to you... Horse. Total Warhammer 3 is a game filled with tree-hugging hippies, the hantavirus, and, perhaps worst of all, the Chinese. To the horror of both myself and Taiwan, we've spawned into a world with digital IDs, social credit scores, and state-backed surveillance. In other words, welcome to Beijing, gentlemen. In this campaign, 6 new legendary lords have materialized across Cathay, each starting with a powerful 20-stack army. Every time one of these major lords fall, the remaining factions receive progressively larger cash injections, meaning the more Chinese we destroy, the stronger China becomes. To make matters even worse, Chinese Armageddon, cranked up to 500% difficulty, will hit at any moment, flooding the world with agents from the CCP, filled with Tigermen, flying elephants, and, most terrifying of all, the Wok. To overcome this threat, I became China's worst nightmare, Mongolian, which means we'll be using horses. Horses with spears, horses with bows, horses with bodily fluids, men pretending to be horses, horses pretending to be men, a dragon that spews radiation, and a gigantic worm. Alright, the last 2 weren't horses, but they're pretty cool. Can we survive communism and reassert Mongolian supremacy over all of Asia? Or will a world that's been Chinese-maxed turn us into just another government statistic? Time to find out. Time to big in. By the way, we are so goddamn close to 50,000 subscribers, so consider subscribing to help me in my eternal battle against my bitter rivals. Before we continue, I need to tell you something. Last week, while I was at my nephew's birthday party, I got trapped in an hour-long conversation with some divorced unk explaining how his ex-wife, the Federal Reserve, and the slap chop guy,
you're gonna love my nuts,
had all conspired to destroy his jet ski. I thought my suffering would never end. But to my joy, that's when a dragon crashed through the ceiling and charred him alive before my very eyes. A normal person might have been scared by this, but not me, because I'd spent the past 3 years on Watcher of Realms training for this exact scenario. If you want to be the same, then you're in luck, because Watcher of Realms is celebrating its 3rd anniversary, and right now you can log in to claim the new Legendary Hero Aurelius Gale for free. And if you use my promo code, you can also choose one powerful epic hero, Alicia, who deals burst damage, or AI, who applies strong control effects. Watcher of Realms is not your average strategy RPG, with over 200 heroes, strategic combat, and new anniversary content, including Kanan, the fallen angel who betrayed the Seraphim race, and Jezebel, the demon who seduced Kanan into becoming a fallen angel. There are also 137 draws, free skins, a brand new art style, and hero enhancement materials to help build your team faster. Watcher of Realms is free to play on PC, Android, and iOS. Scan the QR code on the screen, or use my link below to download the game, and use my promo code to claim your extra epic hero. Thanks to Watcher of Realms for sponsoring today's video. Now, back to the Mongolians. Our journey begins in the eastern steppes, surrounded by angry demons, the homeless, and what I can only assume are rejected character designs from a D-list hentai. We spawn into the world alone, with no friends, no lands, and worst of all, no bitches. But luckily, we're Mongolian, so all we need are horses and throat singing. Before taking on the Great Chinese Invasion, allow me to explain my strategy. For every Cathayan faction we destroy, the rest will receive cash injections that double per faction destroyed. Destroy 1, each faction gets 20k. Destroy 2, each get 40, and so on. This effectively makes them stronger the further we progress. This is what's known as a positive feedback loop, or in simpler terms, a lot of MSG. Not to mention, 6 of the main factions start with a strong 20-stack army, so an early holiday to China would be a great way to end the video in 4 minutes. Point is, we'll need to spend the early game building our strength, accumulating resources, and psychologically preparing for thousands of Asian men to castrate me. With that settled, it was time for our first battle, fittingly against the Chinese. Leading us is the Great Khan, 𝐄𝐑𝐀𝐃. His foreign policy was about what you'd expect from a man built like an alcoholic uncle. Swing first, ask questions, never. Accompanying him are our starting units, a man with a fur fetish, Heath Ledger knockoffs on the front line, basic archers, some mentally stable horsemen, and some other mentally stable man-horse. We made quick work of them and won our first battle. Being Mongolian, we are nomadic. That means that we don't really build cities. We prefer burning them. We're literally incapable of capturing any land. Instead, our lords are essentially their own mobile settlements, recruiting units, constructing buildings, and committing war crimes with the added comfort of working from home. Our closest version of a settlement is tribal gatherings. Here we can upgrade our buildings, much the same as a normal settlement, getting different perks the longer the camp stays settled in one place. These can be established wish for 250 plunder, a resource we accumulate through winning battles. The catch is that your lords have to physically transfer their accumulated plunder to a gathering, which costs money, and if your lord dies, all that plunder goes with him. There's only one thing better than being an arsonist, and that's being a paid arsonist. So I made some incredibly angry, vertically challenged man pay us to purge some of the local hellspawn I was going to attack anyway. Second battle in, and already a siege. Great. We lined up and attacked their walls with our infantry and newly recruited nomad units, then shot them at range with our archers. Zhao personally introduced the enemy general to a concept I like to call sudden and irreversible retirement. After he fell, the rest crumbled. Then we ransacked their city. Shortly after, we attacked another settlement, whose garrison met us on solid ground. My tactic here was simple. I waved my long, girthy, and incredibly hung front line in their face to get their attention, then slipped in the back door and slammed into their rear end with my stallion. Yes, I'm still talking about Warhammer. By this point, it was probably time to start doing something about, the Great Chinese Invasion. So, after signing a non-aggression pact with a rat, I marched down south and attacked an Imperial Warden settlement. It was going to be a tough battle. They didn't have the strongest units, but neither did we. We engaged in some early skirmishes, focusing on their stronger Jade warriors. When they charged, I sent my cav around the mountain and began sweeping up their undefended archers. Another battle won, and another settlement burnt to the ground. This is the Mongol experience. You might have noticed this little progress bar at the top of the screen. This is the Manchu invasion meter. Every Cathayan force we destroy pushes it higher, and once it hits 100%, Hung tribes loyal to Zhao begin spawning across the map to assist his invasion. Destroying the bastion gates accelerates this considerably, so we attacked the first of them, the Dragon Gate. It was a heavily fortified position defended by a significantly stronger army, which would have been concerning if I didn't have 6 units of human meat shields to soak up the initial crossbow volleys. Then we launched our main assault at their gates, where they kindly just opened their doors for us. Our archers stayed back and shot over the walls, while our infantry poured in. As the fighting raged on, their superior forces were making a difference, and we began hemorrhaging units at an alarming rate. It looked, frankly, quite bad, but luckily we had the power of alcoholism on our side to single-handedly tank the remainder of the enemy force, long enough for our survivors to rally and finish the job. After nearly losing our entire army, we managed to win and destroy the first of the bastion gates. With the first gate destroyed, Hung tribes already began to materialize on the map. It was like 1205 all over again. The Turtle Gate fell next. Our ranged units, which included a 𝐂𝐃𝐃𝐈𝐿, shredded through their men, faster than a cop startled by an acorn. With 2 gates gone, the road into mainland Cathay was open. So, after getting some extra hands on deck, I declared war on the Grand Cathayan Alliance and set my sights on the first real target, KEYGEN, the Golden Dragon, leader of the Celestial Loyalists. After blowing a hole in the Great Wall of China, again, I immediately attacked Wei Jin. There was no army, but it was garrisoned by tough units like Celestial Dragon Guards and Sky Lanterns. I rushed their walls straight away and focused on their stronger units with my archers, who now had 10% more ammo. I also enlisted the services of domestic terrorists, who carried a special ranged weapon, otherwise known as C4. With their shadows permanently burnt into the floor. We flooded over the walls, carved through the survivors, and before long, the city fell. Now, whenever we capture a settlement, we have 2 options. We can either ransack or raze them. For Cathay, however, we'll be burning everything. Firstly, much like Imperial Japan, our main goal was to destroy China. And secondly, because the more regions we raze, the more units we unlock through the Adaptive Warlords mechanic. These troops act as an extra recruitment pool, which we can unlock with Khan's Horde, a currency gained by converting plunder at tribal gatherings. So we razed their capital and dealt the Celestial Loyalists a massive blow to begin the war. Naturally, this had pissed the Golden Dragon off quite a bit. So he came down to trample us under the feet of 20,000 Chinese men. But instead of fighting both armies, I retreated, then used Lightning Strike to isolate the weaker force. Much like a divorce attorney, I stood no chance when they were together, but separated. Now, I could start doing some real damage. I had no doubt I could win this battle. The real concern was losing too many units, because immediately after this, we'd have to fight KEYGEN's much stronger force. So I formed a front line of Hung pillagers, along with our new spearmen. Then I sent my ethereal donkeys around the flanks to smash into their rear. For the most part, it worked. But we took more losses than I would have liked, which became immediately apparent when we engaged KEYGEN himself and got our first proper look at one of Cathay's 6 major invasion armies. They brought heavily armed troops with both halberds and crossbows, crystallized felines, and gunpowder. which was a problem because they outranged us and began to shoot us in the face. To counter this, I used my cavalry to confuse their lines, pulled my archers onto the flank, and charged from multiple angles instead of one organized battle. The fighting started to resemble a Discord server the second an e-girl whose real name was Gary joined. Everyone broke off into their own little arguments across the map, which favored us and our natural affinity with horses. Their jade lines crashed into my men, which was slightly concerning until one of them ran directly into our one and only anti-large unit and immediately died. Truly the jade lion of all time. Then 𝐄𝐸 transformed into his golden dragon form and tried to claw Zhao's face off. But in a pure dick measuring contest, no one was hung like Zhao. Together with our manic furball, Zhao beat him within an inch of his life before finishing him off with a shower befitting a golden dragon. After losing over half our men, we managed to clinch a victory thanks to our most lethal weapon, donkeys. With 𝐄𝐸 defeated, we flattened his remaining settlements and wiped out the Celestial Loyalists. He was the first of the 8 major Cathayan lords to fall, which triggered a 20,000 cash injection into every remaining faction. Was I fighting China or funding them? Even I don't know. Zhao upgraded his horde buildings, giving us bonuses to income, replenishment, and cavalry speed, which was good because the following turn, Miao Ying attacked us, and according to auto-resolve, I was about to experience the Chinese judicial system firsthand. We positioned ourselves on a hill between 2 mountains to avoid being flanked. This was a good idea until you consider the fact that they brought balloon-powered AC-130s and flocks of murderous crows. To counter this, I sent in my own brand new giant crow, which was stupid as fuck because I forgot they also had archers. Luckily, Miao decided it was a good idea to rush headfirst into my army alone, so we trapped her in fishing nets, shot her approximately 137 times, then sent Zhao to give her a taste of Mongolian throat singing. She was blown away. In another fortunate turn of events, their skyjunk with 360 range positioned itself directly in front of my archers. This was the Warhammer equivalent of attempting to fight inside a phone booth with a 2-meter long greatsword. That's to say that we shredded it apart and sent it crashing down in flames. Even after taking these big boys and girls down, we were taking heavy casualties. Times like these required an ability to adapt to the ever-changing demands of the world, whilst only making marginal changes to my strategy in order to continually squeeze as much as humanly possible out of my loyal followers. Or, in other words, send in 2 paranoid schizophrenics and shoot them with everything we had. It works 60% of the time, every time. Throughout these battles, Zhao had built up over 3,000 plunder, which we converted into 1,000 Khan's horde. There were 2 ways to spend this: treacherous dealings, similar to Karl's machinations, and offerings to the raging sky, which were similar to rights. So I got double dealings to gain an additional 5,000 gold, and the offering to Shanor, which increased our income from raiding and sacking by 25%. Before taking one of their major settlements, I was intercepted by a giant talking tiger.
This thing is $300.
So I quickly checked my bag of shrooms and realized, no, I was not hallucinating this time. Luckily, I'd recruited a staple of the Mongol Empire, horse archers. Fast, mobile, and capable of committing 12th century drive-bys. They had the unique circle and shoot ability, where, you may want to sit down for this, they circle and shoot. I also recruited the Hung's only form of artillery, shamans on horseback that spewed their bodily fluids at the enemy. Over the following turns, we razed several settlements, including their capital, and slowly, our campaign began to show results. However, our momentum was interrupted by 𝐿TRKILL, who declared war on me and began harassing my backside, eventually massacring our second army. At the same time, the Ivory Dragon attacked me with his full force. This was not ideal. We just unlocked our first Tier 5 unit, which we immediately sacrificed to shut down their Chinese New Year celebrations before they obliterated my men. The fighting was brutal, but eventually, Zhao managed to get his hands on Jiang Shi and introduced him to the ancient Mongolian art of being beaten to death by a barely functioning alcoholic. The following turn, we attacked the false dragon, but this time we went in with the 2 poster children of the Mongol Empire, the Torgud and the Khan's Guard. These 2 were heavily armed, indomitable, killing machines, capable of launching men halfway across the battlefield, and they quickly gathered the scalps of our enemies. Allow me to introduce another 2 regiments, the Windmane Acolytes, and a giant worm. The Acolytes fire the equivalent of a modern-day ICBM, and our worm can literally create earthquakes due to the sheer gravitational force of its gigantic ass. With these new additions, we managed to take out several armies, and even finish Xiao's first quest battle. The good news was that this removed Xiao's curse trait, which had been increasing his upkeep by 50% and debuffing his stats. The bad news was that we came out of it smelling like a piss-stained mattress from a retirement home. One major problem with giving China large sums of cash, besides the whole buying half the world's infrastructure thing, was we essentially had to beat the same army multiple times. By the time we destroyed one, they would just recruit a new one and throw it at us again. It was like trying to fight a hydra, except every new head came with crossbows, vicious furries, and a brand new high-speed rail network. This became very apparent when the false dragon, a man with a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome, ambushed me with yet another 20-stack army. This was our toughest battle so far. These fuckers brought radicalized guerrillas who threw bombs, Tigermen with spears, and a variety of flying abominations whose sole purpose in life was to tear my archers limb from limb. I managed to hold off their initial charge by using my cavalry as a makeshift front line while I reorganized the rest of our army. From there, we focused on their units blobbed up around Zhao, who were held in place like a wasted man roadblocked by his own reflection. And after taking this bastard out again, we could finally move on to more important things. Following this victory, we unlocked the Shadowstone ability, which allowed us to instantly smash a hole in the enemy's walls twice. This was massive for our cav-heavy approach. I also got a lay of the land by using the Sen Scout stealing, which gave us full visibility over the Jade Custodian's territory. Before this, I thought I was fucked, but now I know I am. I started to get impatient with Miao Ying, and I wanted to speed things along, so I recruited another army composed entirely of horse archers and donkeys. The goal was simple: create the most annoying army imaginable, and it was a complete success. Only it didn't annoy my enemies. It annoyed me. I had created the most micromanagement heavy abomination of all time. And as it turned out, donkeys were not particularly effective at killing dragons. Who knew? After a series of victories, we pushed Miao Ying back, and on turn 47, the northern provinces, along with the false dragon, were destroyed. This triggered another cash injection to the remaining Chinese emperors. The ruby dragon had also been taken out by T'Challa, meaning the remaining factions received a total of 240,000 each. Great. That's when we got the endgame warning. We had a small 12-turn window to prepare before the world would be flooded by a scourge of CCP agents, all attempting to drag me in for a very fair and transparent trial. So I got to work preparing for the Oriental apocalypse. First, I used the bloody bribes dealing to grant us military access with Norska, and began establishing tribal gatherings inside their lands. I then completed the second and third quest battles for Xiao, which granted us a host of different buffs, got rid of many debuffs, and it even gave Xiao a full facial. With this money, I recruited some stronger units, and upgraded Xiao's main horde building to tier 5, granting us different bonuses, and the ability to recruit another unit of the Khan's Guard. Then, after securing an alliance with some guys who barely fit on the screen, it happened. The Lunar New Year was upon us. Hundreds of Eastern armies were unleashed across the map. Old foes were revived. Every army stacked with high-tier units. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the end of the world, otherwise known as communism. The only good news was the Western provinces glitched out after we destroyed them on the same turn the endgame hit. This meant that Zhao, wrong one, and the Ivory Dragon were no more. It was also the final piece of good news I would receive for the next 100 turns. Our first adversary was our old friend, Yo Ren, now chilling outside his capital we'd previously raised with 14 armies. When faced against a superior military force, you can't meet them head on, otherwise you'll be crushed. So I had to employ guerrilla warfare. First, I raised any of their undefended land, giving them less places to recruit from. Then, I targeted armies that were separated from their main force. I also spread a potent plague amongst their forces, causing heavy attrition, and because they were packed so tightly together, they would keep reinfecting themselves in a near-endless loop of contagion. In the moments where I had to fight, I used Lightning Strike, allowing me to dictate battles on my own terms. But, much like a thumbs up when texting my dad, fighting several armies at once was inevitable. When those times came, I needed to be smart. The AI will always wait for reinforcements before attacking. If we got lucky with where they spawned, we could block them from entering. It was a bit hit and miss though. Sometimes it'd work, other times it wouldn't. If that failed, there was always plan B, crushing them to death with a 10-story centipede. The war came to a head when the Golden Dragon attacked us with 2 armies specifically designed to disembowel our soft and supple bodies. Fortunately, our reinforcements arrived from behind. Unfortunately, they all began to foam at the mouth and rampage indiscriminately. By this point, my army had evolved into a true Mongolian force. Heavy archers, lancers, monsters, and 𝐿TRAKILL regenerating through 67 lacerations to the head. Our new archers took the dual roles, making up both our range and front line. Due to their superior stats, we didn't have a single unit of actual infantry left. It was a tough battle, but we managed to gain the upper hand after atomizing them with tears made from nuclear waste. With our efforts, chinks were starting to show in the Celestial Loyalist armor. However, there were still 16 armies huddled together like penguins. So, how to deal with this? I attempted to march into their forces, but after several suboptimal results, I reassessed. The problem was that unlike Bonnie Blue, we couldn't do anything against that many men at once. To put it simply,
ape together strong, ape alone less strong.
So I used my army as bait to lure them out. This worked, but after taking a couple of them out, we were surrounded by another 7. 𝐿TRAKILL was well and truly in hot water. So we met them head on with Mongol-powered ICBMs, incinerating a large portion of the local farming population, which I paired with aerial bombardments for good measure. It wasn't going to be that easy though, because they had Terracotta Sentinels, the apex predator of the CCP. To deal with these 10-foot-tall OSHA violations, I brought one of the strongest units in all of Mongolia, the Shackled Dragon. I used our dragon to pin them in place, and once they were stuck, we shot them at range and cycle charged our cavalry until they crumbled. This was an uphill battle, literally. To make these Cathayan armies even more annoying, just about all of them brought heavily armed flying horses that glide over the battlefield to harass my back line. Every fight became a balancing act between dealing with literal brick shithouses whilst trying to prevent my archers from being repurposed as anatomy mannequins. Eventually, after thinning them out, we got overwhelmed by the MSG legions and lost most of my second army, which hurt because, unlike China, I couldn't just shit out 40,000 men. Or could I? Nevertheless, we'd taken out 11 of their armies in just a few turns. The rest made a last-ditch attempt to survive, but between spontaneous combustion, high-speed traffic violations, and approximately 52,336 arrows, we destroyed the Celestial Loyalists. One small clarification, because we're in the endgame, factions will no longer receive any cash injections. Not that I imagine they'll be needing it anyway. Whilst I'd spent the past 40 turns dealing with a homeless guy, we'd also been holding back attacks from the Imperial Wardens, and they'd been annoyingly persistent at slaughtering all of my settled camps. We took out a handful of their armies, but we were losing men in each battle. Eventually, that caught up with us, and we suffered our second defeat. To make matters worse, Miao Ying started ramping up her attacks, and all we could do was hold her off, while trying to make progress against the Imperial Wardens. The real problem, however, was our economy. Every camp we established was destroyed within a few turns, which was extremely inconvenient, because those camps were our main source of income. This meant our entire economy was tied directly to our military success. If we lost, or even took too many casualties, we would go broke. And because beating these armies required stronger units, and stronger units cost more money, we'd entered the economic feedback loop known as being completely fucked. Much like all life's problems, when you're faced with a predicament, your only way out is with violence. So I turned to the most violent bastards I knew, the Khan's Guard. Now buffed with regeneration, poison attacks, perfect vigor, and the Hellblade passive ability. I paired them with the second most violent bastards I knew, the Torgood, anti-large specialists who can expand their own mass, with the Flying Wedge formation. Together, these two killing machines allowed us to consistently take down much stronger forces through sheer
penetration.
The Imperial Wardens mounted their last stand by attacking 𝐿TRAKILL with 4 armies. We met them on a barren wasteland, where they came charging at us with overwhelming numbers. Luckily for us, they brought a large contingent of crossbowmen, whom our horsemen treated the same way a debt collector treats a single mother with an overdue parking fine. We wiped out all 4 armies, finished off the stragglers, and by turn 113, the Imperial Wardens were no more. 2 of the 8 Cathayan endgame factions had now been destroyed. Our main bottleneck was still the economy. We needed profitable tribal gatherings. To fix this, we had to destroy the northern provinces, who were currently the strongest faction in the game. With them gone, this entire section of the map would be safe, and we could finally start making some shekels. But as things stood, we were in a GFC. The only viable economic solution was to throw 𝐿TRAKILL into 1, 2, 3, 4. Fuck it, however many armies that is. We were basically sandwiched between 2 armies. My artillery was being slaughtered, and my cavalry was stretched thin. But I still had my trump card, Sacred Rumblings. This ability summons giant, man-eating worms from beneath the ground, pinning everything in place, which made carpet bombing extremely convenient. Use these spells properly, and how the turntables. We weren't in the best shape, however, and Zhao was standing in the radius of 1 billion Chinamen. I'm afraid the next turn might be his last, or it wasn't. For some godforsaken reason, none of them attacked him. This was joyous news, and we retreated to replenish our forces. The northern provinces were still swole. So we needed to do something about it. From here, the strategy became simple. Send Zhao on a one-way trip to Beijing, let the locals mob him, then turn the entire area into a parasitic industrial microwave. For a while, this worked beautifully. Thousands of Easterners would be transmuted into vapor. That is, until we came up against the False Dragon and another 3 armies, who brought elephants that had evolved to both the Bronze Age and the point of bipedalism. These things smashed through our men with glaives, while grenade-throwing guerrillas and an air force of balloons lit us up from above. This was raising my cortisol. We had to make the fight as chaotic as possible to keep their extra armies occupied, while we tried to deal with the murderous elephants and giant garden gnomes. Emphasis on the tried. Then I focused their sky junk with my archers and artillery, which was made easier by the fact that they decided to float alongside one another. On the ground, the Torgut and Zhao handled the monsters, while our giant worm, accompanied by a shit ton of spells, disrupted their reinforcements long enough for the rest of the army to clean up whatever was still breathing. After taking a lot of losses, somehow we won. With that, Zhao delivered the final blow and raised their capital, and on turn 130, we had annihilated their armies and destroyed them. Only, they're not dead. And not only that, but they're still strength rank 1. Well, shit. It turns out we'd only killed about half their forces. The rest were halfway across the world, chilling on an island next to Yuanbo. My disappointment is immeasurable. The battle was won, but the war against the northern provinces raged on. At least for now, we'd earned some breathing room. So I got to work rebuilding the economy, establishing tribal gatherings across the north. I also secured an alliance with some guy who ate the sun, and researched additional buffs for our Khan's Guard. Whilst we'd been at war for over 100 turns, Kugath and T'Challa had somehow grown into their own organic endgame crisis. Between them, they destroyed 3 of the Chinese factions. So, remember kids, sometimes obesity and national sex offenders are actually good for society. This left only 3 factions, and just the Emerald Dragon to defend mainland Cathay. So I attacked straight away, infecting one army with false promises, which effectively turned them into couch potatoes. Then charged into the heart of their forces. I started the battle by eviscerating one of their armies. Then Zhao went one-on-one with their Elephant Lord, using chloroform to incapacitate him. Truly, you can't run, and you can't hide. We wiped out the rest of their army, and won a heroic victory, killing over 5,000 of them, while losing only 109 of our own men. After back-to-back heroic victories, the Jade Custodians were no more, and with that, China itself had been purged of the Chinese. 6 out of 8 factions were destroyed, leaving the Jade Court and the northern provinces to deal with on the other side of the map. Up until now, we'd mostly been trying to survive being smothered by endless Cathayan swarms. But after seizing control of mainland China, the power dynamic had shifted. We were no longer trying to survive the Chinese apocalypse. Now it was their turn to try and survive the horse-pocalypse. To help us exterminate China once and for all, I needed 2 things. First, I acquired the Nemesis Crown, which gave us a wide range of powerful buffs that get stronger as the crown levels up. There was one minor drawback of making the entire world hate me. Let's just not think about that. The crown also has a timer, meaning we need to keep winning battles, or we'd lose it. At first, this timer gives us 7 turns, but every new level reduces it by 1, down to a minimum of 3. In other words, the crown rewards constant violence, which made it the perfect hat for a wasted hippophile. The main problem was that I wanted Zhao to have the crown. But our other lord had acquired it, and as it turns out, the Nemesis Crown was superglued to the head of the person who captured it. So, I needed to think outside the box. Oh my god, let me back in! I attacked an army with that lord, retreated, which meant he dropped the crown to the enemy, then marched in with Zhao and took it back. I am a military genius. Secondly, I confederated the Hmong and Erkan, the only other legendary lord that was hung, joined our ranks. My war plan was for Zhao to lead the fight against Yuanbo and the Jade Court, whilst Erkan took his forces north to advance on the northern provinces. There was also a very convenient portal south of Cathay, which could teleport us halfway across the map. Fortunately, we were directly next to Yuanbo's capital. Unfortunately, we were immediately surrounded by 3 northern province armies, but an entrepreneur sees opportunity where others see only problems, and these armies would give us the perfect chance to test our new units and abilities. On the front line, we brought the big daddy of the Mongolian Empire, the Centaur Elders. These are giant, terrifying goats. Horses? Men? I don't fucking know, but they literally eat our enemies to replenish ammo, and I think that's pretty cool. We supported them with heavy-hitting wall-ripper artillery from afar, who were off the charts in this new acronym I just made up, WPR. And finally, the Nemesis Crown, which not only buffs our army across the board, but also gives us the unique ability to summon magical projectiles to eviscerate everything within a 50-meter radius. Truly, a beautiful creation, unless you're Chinese. Safe to say, our new and improved army passed its first test with flying colours. Even better, the crown leveled up to the Corrupting Crown, improving our buffs, but more importantly, replenishing 10% movement range after every battle. This was huge, because now 𝐿 could kill more armies per turn. And if you hadn't noticed, at this point, it was turn 162, and I was getting tired of being drenched in the blood of Chinese people. The quicker this was over, the quicker I could get back to playing a real game. Once fully upgraded, the crown would replenish 30% movement after each battle. With that first test complete, I moved on and raised the Jade Court's capital city. Being isolated to the west had clearly helped Yuanbo build up stronger forces than most of the other Cathayan factions, with armies full of great moonbirds, Tigermen, and other exotic wildlife from Texas. Unfortunately for him, none of that really mattered, because 𝐿 had become a weapon of mass destruction, leading to several victories that looked like this. While 𝐿 pushed deeper into Jade Court territory, 𝐿TRAKILL's campaign against the northern provinces began, and much like 𝐿, he started by being spawn-camped by multiple armies. 𝐿TRAKILL is an anti-infantry melee expert, riding on a Pegasus. He is somewhat of a glass cannon, however, and if you forget about him in battle, he can die fairly quickly. To support him, I brought a tier 5 dragon, who not only has scaly skin and can tear our enemies apart, but comes with a unique passive to hide all nearby units, and the ability to spew toxic sediment, giving our enemies radiation poisoning. And all our hard work burning Cathay to the ground had finally paid off, as we recruited 2 units of dread beasts from the last tier of the Adaptive Warlords recruitment pool. With these units, 𝐿TRAKILL started carving through the Northern Province armies, until he was attacked by 3 of them at once. This was his real test. It was a tough battle, and we would have lost it if it wasn't for 𝐿TRAKILL's unique ability to summon a giant gaming chair, buffing our entire army and completely turning the battle around. It did come with the same drawback all gamers suffer, slowly dying while sitting in a chair, but much like my 723rd Stealth Archer reroll, chronic back pain was but a small price to pay for victory. Back in the west, 𝐿 faced off against 4 Jade Court armies, led by Yuanbo himself. We were outnumbered 7-1, but between the 6 giant worms crushing them from the front, and our Khan's elite smashing into them from the back, their casualties began to rise. We'd also leveled up the Nemesis Crown to its max level, giving our troops ridiculous buffs, and by this point, 𝐿 had transcended to godlike power levels, crushing what remained of Yuanbo's forces, winning us a heroic victory. With Yuanbo beaten, the rest of the Jade Court began to collapse. They mounted one final defense with another 4 armies, but much like an intoxicated man with a pair of car keys, 𝐿 was already in motion, and all they could do was watch the damage unfold. Our Mongolian hordes completely decimated their remainders, and by turn 180, Yuanbo and the Jade Court were destroyed. With the Jade Court defeated, the northern provinces were the last defenders of Chinese sovereignty. Just Miaoying and the False Dragon stood between me and complete Asian supremacy, and after a string of victories with 𝐿TRAKILL, they were a shell of their former selves. We attacked their strongest contingent, and it was actually shaping up to be a close battle, until 𝐿 got involved. Bring spearmen, flying abominations, and terracotta sentinels, none of it mattered anymore, and would simply be reduced to ash in the face of Mongolian might. Both our power levels and my cortisol levels were off the charts. They tried to mount one last defense with none other than our dearest friend, the False Dragon. After everything we'd been through, it only felt right that he would be the final obstacle. The man had survived multiple wars, countless defeats, and the complete destruction of his entire people, only to crawl back like some kind of masochist. So, after 𝐿 personally saw to his flagellation, we finally crushed the last of the Chinese defenders. After 184 turns, 268 battles fought, 4,490 units destroyed, and over 80,000 from pillaging, the Mongols had survived Chinese Armageddon and achieved dominance over all of Asia. Now when you die, all people will remember is how Mongolian you were. Once again, thanks to Watcher of Realms for sponsoring today's video. Scan the QR code on screen or use the link below to download the game. And don't forget to use my promo code to choose your extra epic hero.